Have you ever noticed how someone you cared about slowly started drifting away from everyone else? Friends faded, family became too much, and the only voice they kept close was the one whispering in their ear every day. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. And if you look closely, it might just scare you how quiet manipulation can be. You see, real control doesn't usually arrive with a bang. It slips in through the cracks. And one of the most powerful tools a manipulator uses is isolation. But here's the twisted part. They rarely make it obvious. They don't tell you to cut ties directly. That would raise suspicion. Instead, they plant seeds. Tiny calculated comments that slowly erode your trust in the people who care about you. They don't really understand you like I do. She always tries to make you feel bad about yourself. Why do you even tell him things? He's probably laughing behind your back. And just like that, your circle begins to shrink. Not because you want it to, but because you start to question everyone who isn't them. And at first it feels like protection, like they're the only one who gets you, like they're shielding you from a world that just doesn't understand. But what they're actually doing is removing your lifelines one by one. It's not about love, it's not about safety, it's about control. Because once you're isolated, you're vulnerable. You don't have that friend who calls you out when something feels wrong. You don't have a sibling telling you, this isn't you. You don't have outside voices reminding you of who you used to be before the manipulation started. Instead, all you hear is them, their version of the truth, their voice becoming louder while everyone else goes silent. And the scary part, you start to believe them. Because when you're cut off from the people who love you, you begin to think maybe it was your fault. Maybe they were toxic. Maybe this new, quieter life really is peace. But peace doesn't come from walking on eggshells. Love doesn't mean isolating someone from everyone they care about. And protection doesn't feel like prison. Manipulators don't just want your heart, they want your world. And if they can shrink that world down to just them, they don't have to compete with truth or compassion or reality. So if someone in your life is constantly casting doubt on everyone else you care about, if they make you feel like it's you two against the world, but in a way that feels heavy, not empowering, pause and ask yourself, who are you becoming without the people you once leaned on? Because isolation isn't love. And anyone who tries to take away your support system doesn't deserve a place in your story. They don't walk into your life looking like a threat. In fact, they look like the answer to a prayer. They're kind, attentive, protective. They remember the little things, speak softly, offer warmth in ways that make you feel seen, maybe for the first time in a long time. But that's exactly how they get in. Manipulators don't lead with cruelty, they lead with comfort. And it's this comfort that becomes the trap. At first it feels like love, like someone finally sees the weight you carry, like someone finally wants to help you carry it. They wrap you in their attention. They listen closely, watch carefully, and slowly gather everything they need, not to heal you, but to use you. Because their love isn't real, it's a costume, a carefully crafted disguise. And behind that mask, control disguised as concern, control dressed as affection. They say things like, I'm just worried about you. I only want what's best for us. You're too sensitive, that's why I protect you from other people. But worry isn't supposed to feel like surveillance. Love isn't supposed to come with conditions, and protection shouldn't feel like a cage. It starts small. They insist on helping with your decisions at first. It's sweet, even thoughtful. Then suddenly they don't trust your judgment. They question your every move, what you wear, who you talk to, where you go. All under the umbrella of love. You'd be safer if you just stayed home. She's a bad influence. I don't like how she talks to you. I'm the only one who truly knows you. You don't need them. And in the moment, it's easy to mistake their control for care because they say it with a smile, with their arms around you, with words that feel soft even as they carve your freedom away. That's the terrifying brilliance of a manipulator. They don't force the cage around you. They convince you to walk into it yourself. And by the time you realize what's happening, you've already second-guessed yourself 100 times. You've already defended them to the people who saw the truth. You've already told yourself, they just love me too much. But love doesn't suffocate. It doesn't isolate. It doesn't need you to be small to feel secure. If someone only supports you when you're agreeing with them, if they withdraw love when you express your own voice, if they make you feel like their affection is something you have to earn, then what they're offering isn't love. It's leverage. And here's the most painful part. You might still love them because it wasn't all bad, because there were real moments, because they made you feel needed. But you need to ask yourself, do they love you or do they love the version of you they can control? Because real love doesn't wear a mask. It doesn't need to manipulate to feel powerful. It doesn't need to own you to feel connected. And the moment you begin to see the mask for what it is, that's when you start to take your power back. It doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one day and find yourself alone. It's slower, quieter like fog rolling in, until you can't see what you used to rely on. And that's exactly how they want it. The most dangerous manipulators know that their power doesn't come from how much you love them. It comes from how alone you feel without them. At first, it feels like intimacy. They want to spend all their time with you. They say things like, "I've never felt this close to anyone before. You're the only one who understands me. Why would we need anyone else when we have each other?" And it sounds romantic like a fairy tale, like the kind of deep connection we all crave. But slowly your world starts to shrink. You start canceling plans. You stop sharing things with your friends. You hesitate before picking up your phone when family calls because you already know what they'll say. They've noticed the changes, they're worried, and now you find yourself defending the person who's isolating you. Because the manipulator has already planted the seeds. They're just jealous. Your friends don't get us. Your family never really liked me anyway. They don't want you to be happy. And maybe part of you knows that's not true. But they've made themselves the center of your emotional universe. They're the person you run to when you're scared, when you feel lost, when you need comfort. So you stop reaching outward and everything folds inward until you're living inside their version of reality. A reality where they decide who you trust, they decide who's toxic, they decide who deserves access to you. And the cruel irony, you start to feel grateful for their protection, grateful that they're looking out for you, grateful that someone loves you enough to want you all to themselves. But that isn't love, that's possession. Healthy love celebrates your connections. It encourages your friendships. It respects your independence. It doesn't shrink your world down to a single person. It expands it. It strengthens it. If someone truly loves you, they won't be threatened by the people who care about you. They won't try to pull you away from your support system. They'll sit next to you, not above you. They'll want to meet the people you love, not erase them. Because here's the truth. Anyone who wants to isolate you doesn't want what's best for you. They want what's best for them. And the longer you stay in that bubble, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before them. The version of you that laughed with friends, that called your sister just to vent, that showed up to family dinners without excuses. But that version of you is still there, still waiting, still worthy of connection beyond the walls they build around you. You deserve relationships that add to your life, not ones that slowly take it away. And if someone has to cut you off from everyone else in order to keep you, then maybe they were never meant to stay. Have you ever stood in front of a mirror and felt like you no longer recognized the person staring back? You used to be so sure of yourself, so confident in your choices. But now every decision feels like a trap. Every instinct suspicious, every memory blurred. This is what happens when someone turns your mind against you. They don't need to yell. They don't need to threaten. They just need to make you doubt yourself. It often starts with something small. You tell them how something made you feel and they respond with, "You're overreacting. That's not what happened. You're being too sensitive. You always make things about you." At first you second guess yourself. Maybe they're right. Maybe you did misinterpret what happened. Maybe your feelings really are too much. But over time it stops being maybe and it starts becoming truth. Because if someone constantly tells you that your reality is wrong, eventually you start believing them. That's how manipulation works. Not through force, but through erosion. They chip away at your confidence, your memory, your gut instincts until you're no longer sure if the problem is them or you. And once that happens, they control the narrative. They'll rewrite your past, reframe your emotions, redefine your truths, and you'll find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, for feelings you were allowed to have, for simply existing in a way they didn't approve of. It's called gaslighting, and it's one of the most insidious forms of psychological abuse because it's not just meant to hurt you, it's meant to confuse you. When they make you question your own perception, they don't have to take control. You give it to them willingly because you no longer trust yourself. And that's exactly where they want you. Think about it. If you can't trust your own thoughts, who do you turn to? The one person who's been telling you what's real all along. It creates a loop, a cycle of dependence, where you become smaller and smaller, while they grow larger in your mind. Not because they are right, but because you've forgotten how to stand on your own. But here's what they never expect. That the moment you begin to question them, the moment you start asking, what if I'm not crazy? What if I was right all along? What if my voice matters, is the moment their power starts to break. Because the truth, your intuition is not broken, it's just been buried. Under years of doubt, fear, and carefully planted lies. But it's still there, and it's still yours. You are not too sensitive. You are not too emotional. You are not unstable or irrational or difficult to love. You were manipulated into believing you were, and now, you get to remember who you were before they convince you to forget. It doesn't start with control. It starts with connection, with the feeling that someone finally sees you, understands you, fills the empty spaces you never knew you were carrying. And at first it feels like clarity, like the noise of the world has gone quiet, and everything finally makes sense because of them. Their voice becomes the one you listen to the most. Their opinion starts to carry more weight than your own. Their approval feels like oxygen. That's when it begins. The shift is subtle. They don't demand obedience, they shape perception. They tell you how things are, who's really there for you, what's best for your future, which memories are inaccurate, how your feelings are misplaced, and slowly your world tilts. But because you trust them, because you love them, you don't realize it's happening. You stop asking questions. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop needing to know why, because they've already filled in the blanks. And before you even notice it, your internal compass has been replaced with theirs. You begin to think with their thoughts, speak with their words, and feel what they've told you to feel. You may still believe you're independent, still believe you're making your own choices, but what you don't see is how every option was carefully curated, how every decision was subtly nudged, how your world slowly stopped being yours. Because that's how manipulation works at its deepest level, it doesn't force, it reprograms. A skilled manipulator doesn't need to take away your freedom. They just need to convince you that you're using it while quietly pulling the strings. They want you to believe the cage was your own idea, that the boundaries you now live within are just common sense, that your silence is maturity, that your doubt is humility, that your exhaustion is love. And the scariest part, you begin to thank them for it. You feel lucky to be guided, grateful to be grounded, even honored to be chosen by someone who's just trying to help you grow. But what they've really done is erase you, piece by piece, layer by layer, until the person who once dreamed out loud, stood tall, and made bold decisions now hesitates, second guesses, asks permission to exist. You look in the mirror and the face is yours, but the fire in your eyes is gone. This is not just manipulation, this is identity theft, and the price is your reality. But here's what they could never fully erase: the faint echo of who you were before them, the small, steady voice deep inside that whispers, "This isn't right. This isn't me. I used to feel more alive than this." And that voice, that buried, flickering truth, is your way out. Because once you recognize the lie, you can reclaim your reality. You can rebuild your thoughts, you can retrust your feelings, you can pull back every layer they tried to paint over. It won't happen overnight. There will be fear, guilt, confusion, but also freedom. The kind that doesn't whisper what to think, who to be, or what to feel. The kind that lets you stand in your truth again without permission. The kind that reminds you you were never broken, just rewritten. And now, you get to write yourself back. If manipulation looked like violence, you'd run. If it shouted slam doors or wore a warning sign, you'd recognize it instantly. But that's the thing, real manipulation doesn't scream, it whispers. And by the time you hear it clearly, it's already inside you. No one walks into a relationship expecting to lose themselves. No one signs up for control, for confusion, for the slow unraveling of their voice. But that's how manipulation works. Not through explosions, but erosion. It's quiet, it's soft, it comes dressed as care, concern, even love. And it always starts small. A comment here: do you really think that outfit suits you? A question there. Why do you always need to talk to them? A raised eyebrow, a sigh, a silence that lingers just long enough to make you second-guess yourself. These aren't commands, they aren't ultimatums, they're suggestions. Nudges, emotional fingerprints left behind on your choices, and slowly you start to adjust. Not because you're weak, but because you want peace. You want to keep the connection. You want to believe that the person in front of you cares. So you compromise, you shrink, you soften your tone, you delay your boundaries, you quiet your instincts, and you call it love, you call it maturity, you call it being the bigger person. But every time you do, you step 1 inch further away from yourself, until one day you look around and realize you're standing on unfamiliar ground, a version of your life that doesn't feel like yours anymore. That's the power of subtle manipulation. It doesn't ask for everything at once, it asks for little things until it owns everything. Your choices, your confidence, your sense of what's real and what isn't. And what makes it so dangerous is that it hides beneath intentions. They'll say they're just trying to help. They'll tell you it's because they care so much. They'll say, I only want what's best for you. But love does not require you to become smaller. Concern should never sound like control. And no one who genuinely wants what's best for you would ask you to trade your voice for their approval. But the manipulator doesn't want partnership, they want dominance, emotional dominance. And their greatest weapon is subtlety. Because if they can convince you that you're the one changing, that you're the one overreacting, that you're the one who keeps getting it wrong, then they never have to take responsibility. You do it for them. You become the prisoner and the warden. So if something feels off, if your confidence has faded, if your world has gotten smaller, if your decisions no longer feel like your own, pause, look around. Because you may not find chains, you may not find bars, but that doesn't mean you're not being held captive. Not all cages are built with metal. Some are built with words, with patterns, with emotional conditioning so subtle, you don't even realize you're locked inside. But now, you're starting to see. And that's where freedom begins. They don't have to break you. They just have to find where you're already cracked. The most skilled manipulators aren't loud. They're observant. They don't come at you with force. They study you silently, patiently. They watch how your eyes shift when someone raises their voice. They notice the hesitation in your tone when you talk about your parents. They file away every detail about the things that make you ache. Because that's where they'll strike. Not with a weapon, but with words, with timing, with emotional precision. They learn what makes you seek approval, what makes you feel guilty, what you're afraid to lose. And then they use those things not always to hurt you, but to own you. They don't have to say, you need me. They show you by becoming the exact source of comfort for the pain they've studied in you. If you grew up needing to be perfect, to be loved, they'll reward you when you sacrifice and withhold affection when you don't. If you fear abandonment, they'll create just enough instability for you to constantly chase security. If you carry guilt, they'll make you feel responsible for their moods, their well-being, their survival. And you won't even realize it's happening because they're not yelling, they're not forcing, they're speaking the secret language of your wounds. And here's what makes it so devastating. You'll feel like it's your fault. You'll feel like you're not doing enough. You'll feel like you're failing them when the truth is they're strategically training you to doubt yourself. But it's not because you're weak, it's because you're human. We all carry emotional blind spots, unhealed places in our story, needs we were told were too much love, we were taught had to be earned. And manipulators, they don't create those needs. They discover them, then twist them until we can't tell the difference between real love and emotional dependence. Because that's what it becomes. You stop asking, is this person good for me? And you start asking, what do I need to change about myself to keep them happy? They rewire your compass, so now guilt feels like loyalty, sacrifice feels like love, silence feels like safety. And by the time you're drained physically, mentally, emotionally, you're too exhausted to resist. You've given everything and somehow still feel like it's not enough. But that's the design. They don't want your power. They want your sense of self. Because a person without grounding is easy to shape, easy to guilt, easy to control. But here's the turning point. Once you identify the wound, you take back the power. Once you see what they're using against you, it no longer controls you. Ask yourself, what part of me keeps saying yes when I want to say no? What fear do they keep triggering? What do I believe I have to sacrifice in order to be loved? Because when you stop seeing these wounds as shameful and start seeing them as places to heal, you stop being a target, you stop being a puppet, you stop confusing pain with love, and most importantly, you begin to remember who you were before someone taught you to perform for connection.